This is Kei'Mani Latigue, and she was just days away from her 14th birthday when the man that she knew as her father ended her life. That should have been a time for celebration. She should have been getting ready to dress up and just have a blast, surrounded by family and friends. She should have been here. And instead, the one man on the entire planet who should have protected her brutally snuffed out her life. What happened to Kei'Mani was a betrayal of the highest order. I hope this man never knows another day of peace in this life. This is the tragic story of Kei'Mani Latigue. Let's go ahead and get these trigger warnings also out of the way. We're going to be covering topics such as rape, abuse, and the murder of a child. So if you cannot process any of that right now, I fully understand and support you. Please click away and maybe you'll come back at another time. Also, this case is still in court. All that I'm telling you in this moment is alleged.
Kei'Mani was phenomenal. Kei'Mani was a helper. She loved older music. She loved playing video games. She played basketball for Spring Elementary. She was highly intelligent. She loved the friends and family that she was allowed to be around. She was phenomenal.
I have a few different statements coming from family and friends. So Tiara Caston, who is Kei'Mani's mom, had this to say about her little girl. She's very loving, very caring, and she loves Deep, you know. She's funny, happy-go-lucky kid. Her best friend and classmate, Keilina Bullis, said something similar. She was really nice no matter what. Even if people kept messing with her or picking with her, she'd always be nice. Kei'Mani's 6th grade teacher, Kei'Mani Latigue, also had this to say about her. She was very sweet. I enjoyed having her at school every day. She greeted me every single morning with a hug, and that was all she ever truly wanted was affection. The people in her community who had the pleasure of knowing her described her as an intelligent, caring, considerate, and shy girl with a sunny disposition. The 7th grader and honor roll student was just a few days away from accepting a kindness award from her school. She played basketball for her school's team. She enjoyed the sport a lot, and she was even looking forward to a basketball-themed 14th birthday party, her birthday being March 28th. Kei'Mani lived with her maternal grandmother, Dorothy Latigue. While she did live with her grandmother, she did have some contact with both of her parents, Tiara Caston and Darnell Jones Ogletree. She spent most of her 13 years kind of transferring between different homes. From the time she was 9 months old, she was left in the care of her godmother, who was her mother's best friend. But in the last 5 years, she had been in the care of her grandmother, Dorothy Latigue, for the most part. In the last year before her passing, her grandmother had gotten full legal custody of Kei'Mani. Now, unfortunately, the family dynamic, it was a little strained. Tiara, who lived in Cleveland, Ohio, did not have regular contact with Kei'Mani or her mother for that matter, something her aunt told the public during an interview after Kei'Mani was found.
And what we found out in looking into this case is that there's family dynamics at play here, where a lot of the family, they do not like each other. The mother and the grandmother, they were...
Which are mother and daughter.
Yes, I mean, they're openly hostile, particularly the mother toward the grandmother.
Something also interesting to note was that Kei'Mani's father brought her to see Caston with the permission of her grandmother. Dorothy Latigue mentioned in an interview that she believed Kei'Mani's father, Darnell, was more present in Kei'Mani's life than her mother. She believed that despite being aware of his extensive criminal history, that he was stepping up to the plate as a support system for Kei'Mani. Her grandmother also noted Jones was taking Kei'Mani sometimes for whole weekends to spend time with him and his other children. There's questions about whether Jones is Kei'Mani's biological father, so there is a chance that two are not biologically related according to the grandmother. I didn't find any concrete confirmation in any reports to really say one way or the other. So in this moment, we're just going to go ahead and reference Jones as her father because that is who Kei'Mani knew him to be. Kei'Mani Latigue, the 6th grade teacher teacher from before, mentioned that herself and other staff notified child services on multiple occasions because of concerning things Kei'Mani said and visible marks. She said, Kei'Mani expressed some things to us in the school, not only to myself, but other adults in the building. Her peers, her school bus driver, who all made calls to Child Protective Services. Lucas County Children's Services was notified on several different occasions that she may be at risk of child abuse in the home, and it just fell on deaf ears. Our calls were not heard, her voice was not heard, and she told us some very concerning things that were happening to her in the household. We don't really know how far this goes, but we know that it caused enough concern that teachers, staff, and other mandated reporters clearly believe that something was happening in the household that should not have been happening. Children deserve to be safe in whatever environment that they're in. So Kei'Mani's grandmother works the night shift. So there were nights where Kei'Mani was home alone, just her and the family's 2 dogs. So on the night of March 16th, which is a Sunday, she's hanging out at home. She's getting ready for the upcoming week. What her father tells us is that Kei'Mani called him because she was afraid. She believes someone was trying to break into the house. So he and his cousin, Caleb Jones Dixon, drove to Kei'Mani's grandmother's home, and they just kind of sat outside in Dixon's cars for a few hours, just keeping an eye on things. He then says that around 12:30 a.m. that next morning, the cousin, Caleb, drove Jones back to his house, and that was the end of it. That was allegedly the last time that he'd seen her. And this seems a little suspicious to me because I don't know any fathers who would leave their children home alone, especially after expressing to them, hey, I think somebody's trying to break in. Why wouldn't you stay the entire night until you knew that she wasn't alone anymore? Also, why didn't you call the grandmother? A parent would do more. And it also makes me wonder, the grandmother didn't know about this, right? So why wouldn't Kei'Mani have called her grandmother, who is her legal guardian, to say that she felt unsafe either? We don't hear that the grandmother was called at any point that night to say anything, and I feel like that would be a pivotal thing to mention in this case. Dorothy Latigue comes home on the morning of the 17th, and she finds her house in complete disarray. The door was unlocked, the stove was on, you could smell gas wafting through the house, a rug was moved out of its normal spot. Some of Kei'Mani's clothing, including a pair of blood-stained underpants, were found in the dining room, which her grandmother mentioned alarmed her because Kei'Mani never got undressed in the dining room. Kei'Mani had also left her keys and her glasses behind, which according to her grandmother, she couldn't see without her glasses. And on top of that, she was called a latchkey kid in interviews with the grandmother. So she was used to having a key and being able to get in and out of the house without having an adult present. And she usually left the house before Dorothy Latigue would arrive home from work. Kei'Mani would have already left for school. So that part wasn't unusual, but the scene itself is what threw the grandmother off. So her grandmother had this to say: it was Monday morning, and when I came home, she wasn't here. Of course, she was supposed to have been on her way to school, but according to the way the house was set up, once I got here, because it was in complete disarray, she wasn't here, so I called the school so I could talk to her, and they said she wasn't there.
I was under the impression that she was supposed to have been at school because I usually get here right after she leaves for school. And she wasn't here, but I called the school and they said that she wasn't there. So I went to the school just to, I guess, really get the stamp of approval for that, and they stated the same thing. She was not there.
So then she contacts Darnell Jones Ogletree to say, hey, your little girl is missing, and find out if he knew anything. So the two of them then set out to look for her. So curious note, Kei'Mani's grandmother also disclosed to her father the thing about the bloody underpants being found. When she went back to look for those underpants, they were missing. So after the fact, she kind of believes that Jones took them, and I'm inclined to believe the same thing. Was he trying to hide evidence? So grandmother calls Kei'Mani's phone and the calls are going straight to voicemail. So Dorothy Latigue expressed she was not the kind of kid who would run away, and she had never even tried to run away. Her grandmother said, she always calls me and asks me prior to going anywhere. She's a latchkey kid. So she has her own keys for the home. She has a phone just in case something happens so she can contact somebody. She's very responsible, Dorothy Latigue said. So we know on March 18th, Dorothy Latigue called the police department to notify them that Kei'Mani was missing.
There's no dispatch, not emergency.
Yes, I'd like to make a police report.
Okay, what's the address?
Elm Street,
Okay, what kind of report?
a missing person.
Okay, what's your name?
Mine or hers?
Yours?
Dorothy
Okay, and who's
Latigue.
missing?
Kei'Mani.
Is this your daughter or son?
This is my granddaughter.
Okay, do you have custody?
I do.
Okay, how old is she?
13.
How long ago she's been missing?
To the best of my understanding, she's just been missing this morning. And I called her school and went up to her school, and they said she's not there.
What school does she go to?
Spring.
Do you remember, did you see what she was wearing before she left?
No, she's usually going to school before I get home from work.
Okay. Is she black, white, or Hispanic?
She's black. She looks Hispanic.
Okay, and then what was her last name?
Latigue.
Your phone number?
419.
Okay, does she have a phone on her that you're aware of?
She does, and it's dead because it's going straight to voicemail.
All right, they'll be out, then they'll be out.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, bye.
And then on March 21st, Kei'Mani's family members and members of the community organized a search party and handed out flyers with her details and information with who to get in contact with if they had any idea what might have happened to Kei'Mani. They searched areas of East Manhattan and Stickney Street, focusing on North Toledo, which is where she was reported missing. The collective community banded together and they knocked on the door, they asked questions, they contacted the authorities with whatever information they could find to help with this case. Police interviewed Kei'Mani's father and his cousin, which is how we got the details of what allegedly happened that night. The statements actually raised red flags with the interviewing officers, and they seemed to believe the men weren't being entirely truthful. Specifically, they pinpointed in later police reports that Darnell Jones gave inconsistent information about his whereabouts and activities on that night. It's these statements where we get information about what allegedly happened the night she disappeared. I'm sure more accurate details are going to come out while the actual trial is going on, but this is what we know at this time. Then on March 23rd, a warrant for abduction from a residence was issued for Darnell Jones. The warrant alleged that Jones was the last person to see Kei'Mani, that he removed Kei'Mani from the home of her legal guardian without said guardian's consent. The warrant also mentioned police had obtained surveillance video and witness statements to further support their reasoning for the warrant. Last check of evidence submitted states they found over 200 pieces of supporting evidence tying Jones to Kei'Mani's whereabouts. And the home that Kei'Mani lived in with her grandmother was outfitted with cameras. There was a ring and a couple other cameras throughout the outside of the property. Unfortunately, that leads us to the very triggering details of this case. So here's your last opportunity to click away. This is all alleged. So Jones abducted Kei'Mani. He brought her to a vacant, burnt out house in a part of the neighborhood where she would have never gone on her own. This house had 2 stories. Her villainous father dragged her to the 2nd floor of that house, and he violated her in ways that no one should ever violate any creature, human or otherwise, let alone their own flesh and blood. He stole her innocence. Then he took what is described described in later reportings as a bladed instrument, and he nearly decapitated her. And then at some point during that attack, or after the attack, after she had already transitioned, he removed her hands. And how confusing it must have been for her. How distorted such a familiar face must have seemed in that moment. On or around March 24th, police received a tip leading them to the general area around the Miami Street house in which Kei'Mani was left. They gathered police dogs and they searched around that area until they were led to this house. Outside, as they're investigating, dozens of community members have congregated and they're talking and they're praying and they're comforting each other and they're just waiting for answers and confirmation. Tierra Caston had this to say in that moment.
I just want to know if it's my baby. They still not telling me nothing. It takes nothing. It's nothing to take a picture. It's nothing to, you know what I'm saying, let me know when the coroner's bringing her out so I can see if that's indeed my baby. Y'all not saying nothing. And y'all can tell if it's a grown-ass woman or if it's a little kid. My daughter tall, but she still has the body of a child. You know the difference.
So what are they telling you?
They're not telling me nothing. They ain't told me nothing. Not a word. Then they talking about it might be days before I be able to identify my child. Like, no.
What have you been told up until this point?
She also stated there was no reason for Kei'Mani to be in that house, let alone in the area where the house is located. At around 3:15 p.m. that day, Kei'Mani's remains were found. The police pulled Tierra Caston out of view, and shortly later she came back, dropping to her knees and sobbing. Not long after, the yard of the abandoned house was piled high with symbols of love, messages of justice, artistic renderings depicting Kei'Mani, teddy bears, candies, kind words, and tears. The community united to show her love, to remind her and the world of how important she was and how important she is. After they found Kei'Mani, the warrant for Jones went from abduction to murder, and he went on the run. At some point during the time between when Kei'Mani went missing, when she was found, and when he went on the run, Darnell Jones Ogletree got in contact with his own mother, and they had a brief conversation where he asked her if she knew about what was going on with the case. And she said she didn't really know what was going on. And she asked him for more details, to which he said he would give her more details at a later time. What's strange and quite frankly suspicious about this is that when authorities reached out to her to find out if she'd been in touch with Jones and find out if she knew anything, she not only told them she had not been in touch with Jones at all, but she also said that she didn't have any clue what was going on with Kei'Mani. So I don't understand if she was trying to protect him. It's disturbing to me that a grandmother wouldn't be doing everything in her power to help find her granddaughter. I don't know if there's just a loyalty to her son. I mean, I don't know why you wouldn't want to be more involved. So they're seeking phone records from the phone carrier between December 21st of 2024 and March 25th of 2025. I'm not sure why it dates that far back. It kind of makes me wonder if they're wondering if there was any clue that this was going to happen, that he was going to go this far. Remember that we talked about surveillance, right? In previous court filings, they discussed surveillance. So Jones was dating a woman at the time of his arrest, and her identity is unknown to the public, but she says that on March 21st, he told her to cut off her camera, and she had this to say about the whole situation. The weird thing about it, before they even showed up, he asked me to turn my cameras off. I have cameras in my house, and he asked you to turn them off. I said, why would you want me to turn the cameras off? He said, because I didn't come home till 5 o'clock that morning, and he didn't want them to suspect anything because he didn't show till 5. I'm thinking in my head, well, if you don't have anything to hide, then why would I turn the cameras off? And I didn't, but he thought I did, which excellent decision on her part. I'm glad she didn't listen. I'm glad she didn't do what he asked. A relative of this girlfriend caught Jones moving some items from his SUV into her home, where he hid them beneath the basement steps. And she said it was like a mat for the back of your truck, not a pickup, but an SUV. You know, when you lay your seats down and you put that rubber mat in there to protect the back of your seats in case you're hauling something. That's what he rolled up and put in my basement. And his work boots, which were caked with mud, and he hasn't worked in a while, she called it. Jones ends up calling this woman from Columbus, Ohio, while he was still on the run. And she called the police and told them where to find him, which kudos to you. Jones was a fugitive for just a few hours, but the authorities did locate him at 10 a.m. on March 25th. When one of the SWAT officers approached him, telling him to show his hands multiple times, Jones kept saying, "Just kill me."
Here, man. What's your hands? Kill me. Dude, show me your fucking hands right now. Me, pull your fucking hand out of your... I swear to God, pull your...
Shots fired. Shots fired. Dennis in a second. Don't
fucking move.
You ain't getting out that easy. Then Jones allegedly removed a weapon that was concealed in his clothing and started firing at the officers. The surrounding officers, they shot back. Jones was shot and critically injured. Luckily, none of the police officers were, but he was hospitalized until about April 9th. He's now in a stable condition, but he is currently in a wheelchair. After his release, he was taken to the Columbus jail and held without bond on felonious assault charges as a result of a shootout with police. He missed an appearance in Franklin County Court on April 10th because he was still recovering. His charges with Columbus were placed on hold, and he was extradited to Toledo to face charges for Kei'Mani's murder. And so he's now in the custody of Lucas County. On March 25th, Carl Schmidt, MD, MPH with Lucas County's coroner's office, declared in a statement that Kei'Mani's cause of death was multiple incised wounds of the neck and ruled her death a homicide. On April 18th, in an affidavit, Jones admits that he was the one who killed his daughter and inflicted the large laceration to her neck. In a second affidavit, he also admits to kidnapping and dragging the terrified and reluctant girl into the house where her remains were found. So just back on May 23rd, they had the first evidentiary hearing where they dropped over 200 pieces of evidence related to this crime. His actual court case is scheduled for April of 2026. They have a lot of evidence tying this man. We'll see what happens here. In the meantime, he's been placed on a bond of $4 million, $2 million for the murder charges, $1 million for the abduction charges, and $1 million for felonious assault charges. His other charges include felony child endangerment, abuse of a court, and tampering with evidence. If he makes the bond, he has to surrender his passport. He cannot have any contact with minors, and he has to be on lockdown, which I'm assuming means confinement to his home. How, and more importantly, why would you ever give such a monster bond and let him have access to the general public to start with? Because I mean, if he would do this terrible thing to a loved one, what the heck is he gonna do to a complete stranger? Which is actually something we're gonna discuss here in a moment, because we're gonna go over his history of criminal offenses. He's also restricted from having any contact with Kei'Mani's family. This might not surprise anybody, but Darnell Jones Ogletree has a history of criminal offenses that spans back 15 years with a pattern of violence, crimes escalating in severity. So at 19, he was arrested for screaming outside of his apartment while intoxicated. But a few months after that incident, he and another man attempted to burn down a Toledo warehouse with a lighter and some flammable fluid. For that incident, he was charged with arson, to which he pled guilty to a lesser charge, and he was placed on probation. Then he was charged for shooting at someone, which he was already a convicted felon at that point, so he was not even legally allowed to own a gun. Again, he was given probation, which not long after he violated his probation by breaking a window while out on work release. Then in 2017, he smashed a car alternator into the face of another man, who then had to have 20 stitches, and in that case, he was charged with felonious assault. He pled guilty to a lesser charge, and he was given a lighter jail sentence. And I'm getting more annoyed as I go over this history, because this man, like I said, has been escalating for years, and he keeps getting away. He shouldn't have been allowed to leave prison after the first assault, and it was literally just a matter of time before things got explosive. And that's not even the worst of it. Here's a few more ridiculous instances. So in 2019, He held his then wife by the throat over the balcony in the home that they lived in. And I have some footage from the neighbors to add in here.
Us, he had her on that side right there, hanging off the balcony by her throat.
We see the neighbors tried to intervene in this attack. One of them even telling Jones, hey, I'm gonna come up there if you don't pull her back over. And
Harold Glander confronted Jones.
And I yelled down there to pull her back over, and he almost dropped her. So I got myself down there and I looked at him. I said, man, if you don't pull her back, I'm coming up. He goes, come on. So I didn't take no steps, and I was watching the girl. He almost let go of her.
He damn near dropped her. He did end up pulling her back onto the balcony, and police recalls when the authorities went into the home, he was holding a knife. In this case, he pled no contest, but instead of serving jail time, as he should have, he was required to complete a substance abuse program. Then in 2022, he was found intoxicated once again, this time in the parking lot of a daycare, and he had a crack pipe on him, and he fired a gun in the vicinity. That time he was jailed for several months in the correction center of Northwest Ohio, but then once again he was released. And these are just some of the lowlights of his crimes. He also spent time in prison in both Franklin and Lorain counties for gun-related offenses that found some or all of the guns in questions had their serial numbers scraped off, which that right there would have been an indication that he was up to no good, because as we know here, if you scratch the serial number off of a gun, it is no longer a legal gun. What you're basically telling people is you don't want to be tracked by removing the serial number. So he was clearly going to do some shit he had no business doing. I'm gonna keep up with this case and I will let you know more. I feel like now's a good time to say that if you want a case update in the future, you might want to subscribe. We talk dark history, weird mysteries, true crime, and strange tales here. So if any of those topics are of interest to you, I got you. But here is where we stand with the community. So the community gathered once again for Kei'Mani's 14th birthday, and again they just showered her with love. Meanwhile, Kei'Mani's grandmother, Dorothy Latigue, started receiving some death threats after Kei'Mani's discovery. People from the community and people online who were familiar with the story made their own assumptions about Dorothy Latigue's culpability. They commented on how she was raising Kei'Mani. They accused her of not doing enough to protect Kei'Mani. And one such day, law enforcement, they had to give her a call and let her know that there was a mob forming in front of her house. And police arrived later. They led her away in handcuffs, which is something she, I guess, requested for her own safety.
Well, I was called and told that there was a mob of people in front of my house. They were angry. It was more or less the people that were here earlier waiting to see if it was Kei'Mani that was in the home. And basically some people from the neighborhood had contacted me and said that there was a mob in front of my house and they were talking about what they were going to do to me once I came home. So the police, the detective, said that she would have a unit come out and help me get my things and more or less escort me off the property. I asked to be handcuffed.
A department spokesperson also said that it's police policy to transport everyone in handcuffs. This incident made people believe that she'd been arrested for something related to Kei'Mani's case. That was not the case. They were leading her to safety. That property that Kei'Mani was found in just a couple of days after she was found was considered condemned. It was declared a nuisance property, so it was marked for demolition. They needed to cut the water off. It was going to take a couple weeks to get the gas and electricity cut off. Those things needed to be done before the demolition could start. Then on April 8th, the city reached out and had everyone move all the memorial items, so they moved it across the street from the property. And then a couple of days later, somebody set that house on fire again. On April 19th at around 7 a.m., neighbors started making phone calls to the police to let them know what was going on. Fire crews came out. Because it's condemned property, they couldn't go in. We don't know who did that, but there's evidence in there, so they really should have left it alone. but they got the fire contained. Building was considered too unstable, and not long after, an excavator came and made quick work demolishing the building entirely. Authorities did say that they didn't believe the demolition was going to impact the ongoing investigation into Kei'Mani's death, but Lucas County prosecuting attorney Julia Bates disagreed, stating it is deeply disappointing that someone would deliberately set fire to any structure, but especially this particular location on Miami Street in Toledo. This act not only placed Toledo fire and rescue personnel in an extremely dangerous and unnecessary situation, but it also compromised a location that remains critical in an ongoing criminal investigation. This site held evidentiary value for all parties involved in the pursuit of justice, and its destruction is both reckless and troubling. Thankfully, no one was injured by the fire. Authorities are still investigating who set fire. And I do have a theory. Again, it's a theory, so take it with a grain of salt. But what would stop someone who was affiliated with Jones from burning the house down to get rid of the evidence? We can only hope investigators cleared the majority of the evidence before that fire. In the meantime, Jones is in jail, and I'm sorry because I have to say it, and this is not me completely downing law enforcement. Stuff slips, right? But I do feel like the justice system failed Kei'Mani. Had they kept that felonious demon behind bars, he wouldn't have had access to her. She would have made it to her 14th birthday, and she could be very well thriving in this moment. Instead, in her final moments, she had her innocence stripped away, her throat opened, the last face that she would see. The whole situation just had to be so confusing for her. My heart breaks for her because I feel like this could have been stopped. I feel like there were a bunch of points in time where this could have been stopped. Meanwhile, Lucas County Children's Services, which I'm going to refer to as LCCS for the rest of this video, stated this agency is conducting an internal review of their policies as a result of how Kei'Mani's case was handled. According to reports, LCCS was contacted at least 3 separate times with concerns Kei'Mani was being abused or neglected. At the time, they didn't see any reason to remove Kei'Mani from Dorothy Latigue's care because her needs were being met.
But no, I mean, we determined that the placement there was appropriate. All the basic needs of the child were being met. She was getting all of her sustenance, her housing conditions were fine, her school and medical conditions were being met. So the presence of a father would not have caused us, I think, to recommend to the juvenile court that they change custody.
Latigue actually admitted to physically disciplining Kei'Mani. They also stated Kei'Mani was interviewed separately from her grandmother, and she expressed that she felt safe in the home and she understood why her grandmother was disciplining her. The county kind of pointed Dorothy to resources on how to discipline children without using physical correction. Now, I realize that this information has more to do with the grandmother than it does with Jones. Jones, I believe, is 100% the culprit here. I don't think that the grandmother knew that this was going to happen. She probably had no clue, just like anybody else involved in the situation. While I do believe that she has some culpability in the fact that considering his history, considering her awareness of his history, Kei'Mani should have never had contact with her father. But I mention this because there's pain point in the community with LCCS. They believe they should have intervened more, and maybe had Jones not had any contact with Kei'Mani, this inevitably would have saved her. They consider it a pain point anyway because they feel not only was Kei'Mani failed, but other children in the community have also been failed and didn't have their concerns accurately dealt with. So they're calling for real change in the system and for more to be done for children to be seen, and I mean truly seen. I promise you I'm not downing all Child Protective Service group. I think there are a lot of people who do that job because they genuinely want to help the children that they're servicing, and it's not just about a paycheck to them. But I can tell you, as someone who regularly follows cases and regularly follows true crime, and not just for the research but just for my own information, this happens a lot. This is a pain point for a lot of people in different areas of the country. People just don't feel like Child Protective Services are doing enough. But I also think that we don't see the good things that Child Protective Services does do, because of course at that point point, children are out of these unsafe situations and circumstances and environments, so there's nothing to report on. I'm certain that more children have been saved than there have been hurt by Child Protective Services involvement, but it does appear to be a pain point for people all over this country. I thought it was something that was necessary to bring up because they protested outside of LCCS's office buildings. Like, they were that upset, and it's understandable. 3 calls is a lot to Child Protective Services, and then for there not to have been like any major movement. But we also want to note that there hadn't been any calls to LCCS in the year prior to Kei'Mani's murder. They stated they followed their normal procedures, which is interviewing both the guardian and the child separately. They interviewed other people who were familiar with the family. They interviewed the people who made the referrals, and they checked in on the home where Kei'Mani and her grandmother lived. When they closed out the case, they sent letters to the mandated reporters when the investigation was over. And they also mentioned, though, that in those 3 times that they showed up at Kei'Mani's home, no one ever mentioned Darnell Jones Ogletree as an involved adult or support person in her case. So they didn't know. They had no idea. Maybe part of doing better for these kids means looking into any adult who may have ties to the children, whether that be familial ties or even friend of the family type ties. These adults need to be looked into further. We need to be looking at whether this person has ever been arrested. If so, what are their crimes? I'm not saying every single person with a criminal history is a bad person who's going to do terrible things to children. Most people do not. However, there's red flags. If there's a red flag, we should be doing more to keep those people away. Because had they known, they could have said, she's not allowed to have contact with this person and definitely not allowed to leave the house with her at any point in time. Maybe we just need to be checking into all adults within like a 50-mile or even a 100-mile radius to the child who might have regular contact with them. But at the end of the day, I just hope that they throw the book at Jones. And quite frankly, if the cousin was more involved, I hope they lock his ass up too. I hope they lock them both up and throw away the key. And people need to be held accountable for the terrible things they do. I'm never going to shut my mouth about that. I think it's everybody's job to protect children. I just take solace in the fact he's behind bars. May he just never know peace for the rest of his days. Parents out there who are spending their last penny, their last moment, would literally give their last organ, would walk across the desert to protect their children. And then there's parents like this who abuse their children, who murder their children. Like, it's not fair. And I'm just kind of hoping for change. Like, I'm hoping for change, not even just in Lucas County, but all over the US, because like I said, this seems to be a problem. Like, it's something that pops up a lot in these cases involving children. People are notified and nothing happens. Maybe we need better training. When they go into these houses, they should be checking every room, every floor, everything. You can't just walk into one room, have a quick conversation with kid, have a quick conversation with the adult and say, okay, everything's copacetic. That's it. I just want to send my love to Kei'Mani's loved ones and to Kei'Mani herself and to the community of Toledo. And I wish you all to do the same in the comments below. I also want you to share your thought. In the meantime, just stay safe, be peaceful.